I'm going to talk first of all about this whole concept of universal values. So, how can we find some set of values that we could hold in common, despite the fact we may be from different cultural, religious backgrounds? What sort of common perspectives can we have? How can we feel some sense of being in common? Because if we can find that, then that will solve a lot of problems, because of course difference is often perceived as creating a situation where you don't appreciate the other or value them because they don't have the true faith, or they're not the same cultural background as me, and I don't understand people from a different cultural background.
Well, so, I know better, there's another one.
Here we go. Oh yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, well done, Robin.
Go back.
Don't know how you did it. That's fine. Well, that's what I want to be. So we're all very different, right? In one sense, we're all very different. I mean, even if I think I have 4 children, if I think about my 4 children, they're actually very different, even though they have the same parents. We know how different they are. So we're different, and yet we have much in common. And this is just a little picture, sense of ethnic difference and age difference, and so on and so on and so on. So we're going to explore some thoughts about what we hold in common. Well, a big, as you possibly gathered from, yes, good, that's work. As you gathered from Robin's presentation, because he came in with these 5 principles that UPF speaks of as a sort of foundation for peace building. For many people of faith, in the past, of course, our faith has held us as a community within faith, but often divided us from one another because of differences of faith. But UPF's whole vision of things is that we are one family under God, in the sense that if we have that sort of perspective, a faith perspective, we have the sense that we have come from a creator, or an ultimate reality, a great spirit, a word for God. We have that in common in a sense. But our perspective is that all those faiths share a common origin, and humanity as a whole shares a common origin. That's why, despite our differences, fundamentally we have so much in common. But more profoundly, maybe, Father Moon's perspective was of God as a creator, but in the sense of a creator, an origin with like a parental heart. Because when you put all your heart and soul into creating something, then you feel a love and a commitment and a valuing of what you've made, because you put your heart and your whole being into it. So his sense very much was, regardless of what ethnicity you have or what culture you belong to, we're all the creation of God. Of course, this goes even beyond humanity, of course, into the wider sense of creation as one creation. But amongst human beings, if you like, we have one common origin, one, he would express it, one common creator stroke parent. And therefore, what does that mean? It means we have one common humanity, or if you like, we're all brothers and sisters. So although we may have a sense of distance because someone's different from myself, or speak a different language, or come from a different culture, or whatever, we have to recognize that because this is another human being coming from that common origin, from God's point of view, they're another child. So just as in my small family, just 4 kids, they're very different from one another, yet actually they're all our children. And even though they may have different interests or things which create frictions or misunderstandings or whatever, if you can think as a brother or sister how your fellow brothers and sisters are loved and regarded by your parents, and feel that heart, it might smooth out some of the tensions you'd have with each other because you're different. So this type of perspective is trying to very much promote that sense that although someone may come from a different culture or a different religious background, from the point of view of ultimately of the Creator, these are beloved children, and therefore these are my brothers and sisters. Now, Of course, ideals are not easy to follow in practice. We can all say, oh, isn't that lovely? Yes, I agree with that. But we still might have a very strong antipathy towards someone else, and in that moment we're forgetting about that. But ideals are important because we have to continuously adjust ourselves and measure ourselves when we fall short of those ideals, by those ideals, and try and come back to them again and again and again. So it's something which is like a moral compass, helps us to get back to a right attitude when we find ourselves with a bad one, as of course we often do. So that sense, and I'm going to talk more about this as well, out of the sort of heart of our founders that sort of brought into being something which of course they would ultimately attribute to God's inspirations, who were not their own capacity alone, but it's this sort of heart that our origin is a common origin of love, and a heart that deeply, deeply loves, all humanity and all of the universe and all creation. So if our religious path is taking us closer to that heart of God, then actually what it should also mean is that we feel a heart that cares for everybody regardless of differences from ourselves. So that's of course that's hugely demanding, but very, very important, and became much more important because now we live in this sort of very globalized world. So we are no longer, if you live in a different valley, you rarely see one another. Now, even though we live on opposite sides of the world, we are actually very close, and we're interacting with one another more so because of the advances we've made in communications and brought us into a sort of global village. Okay, so anyhow, this is an interesting thought. So if we're talking about having a common origin, again, I'm going to talk from the perspective of faith, but as I mentioned, not everybody who's involved with UPF may have a faith or a concept of a personal God. But I'm going to talk from that, and I think it's very important for people of faith, particularly in our part of the world where religious belief is almost downgraded now to the point that its contribution is sometimes not even regarded as a contribution. But I think people of faith have a huge responsibility, because they should have that type of profound motivation and commitment to God and higher ideals. Then we have a very big contribution to make, because one of the most crucial points about making a more peaceful world is actually making better people. Anyhow, if we're thinking about how can we get to understand about God, of course we would think about the great religious founders and the great scriptures and philosophies, which we continue to value around our world, and which have lasted century upon century in their relevance and meaningfulness. But also, of course, we can think about the fact that the natural world, the universe in which we live, is in itself an expression of the common origin or the creator. So in a way, I'm going to use various different scriptural quotations. I think that's valuable. Margaret was using this morning this one.
That's fine.
This anthology of, it's a very interesting book. There are two volumes of this one, and it's an anthology of different scriptural texts from all different faiths, categorized under different sections. So you can look under a section maybe about the creator or whatever, and you can find scriptural quotations from almost every conceivable religious background. And it helps us to appreciate
similarities,
the beauty and the insight that comes from faiths other than maybe our own, which historically we've not been very good at.
Yeah.
The sense is if people have a strong commitment to one faith, everybody else is an infidel or
And then just have the authors.
No, it's many authors.
It's many authors.
I mean, it's all scriptural, but there's a.
Father Moon brought together many.
So we're going to look at also the natural world, and of course the reality is that many scriptures also look at the universe in which we live, and through it find out something about God in their scriptural content. And I'm just quoting a few quotations from different faiths. So this is from Judaism, from the Psalms. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. And from the Quran, there is no God but he, the living, the self-subsisting, eternal. No slumber can seize him nor sleep. His are all things in the heavens and on the earth. So all talking about God as the God who created the universe. In Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans, in New Testament Christianity, ever since the creation of the world, his, meaning God's eternal power and deity, has been perceived in the things that have been made in the created world.
Yeah.
And from the Bhagavad Gita, Hinduism, I am the nucleus of every creature, Arjuna. For without me nothing can exist, neither animate nor inanimate. Wherever you find strength or beauty or spiritual power, you may be sure that these have sprung from a spark of my essence. Some very beautiful scriptural quotations from Sikhism. He is the sole supreme being of eternal manifestation, creator, immanent reality, without fear, without rancor, timeless form, unincarnate, self-existent. So it's just a few different scriptural quotations expressing how the creator is expressing his nature through the creation, which reflects God's nature. And if you think about it, in our own creativity as well, be it in writing books, some of you here are people who write books, be it in literature, be it in the visual arts, be it in film, be it in music, wherever it is, the person who's creating that is expressing who they are, and probably what they've experienced as well through their creativity. So, because there's some sort of common feature, you know, sometimes they have these big issues over whether a particular piece of art can really be attributed to the great artist, and it will affect it. You know, there's these crazy valuations they put on artwork. It will affect whether something's worth, you know, £1,000 or £100,000 or £1 million or whatever it is, whether it can be correctly attributed to definitely being a Renoir or definitely being, you know, whatever it is, if it's a great artist. So, and of course they can't always prove that in, you know, an immediately sort of provable fashion, because it's a long time ago. So then they do all sorts of tests on how old it is, and they have all sorts of, ultimately it comes down to art experts, and they have to make a judgment, you know, provided they can prove that paint and the canvas of the right era and all the rest of it. In the end, it comes down to a judgment, you know, often of that person. So, in other words, the artwork of particular artists has a certain something about it which testifies to the unique character of the creator. So if we think about that, then we can say that the artist is revealed in the painting, or the creator in the creation. So we're going to take a particular look at just a couple of very fundamental aspects of the universe in which we live, and our own being as well, which must be evidence of, in a sense, the nature of the origin. Because the origin expresses itself, the creator expresses itself through the creation. You've got to welcome somebody new, I think.
Hi.
Hi, nice to have you. We've not long since started this presentation, so I think
You're
it'd be
welcome.
okay to catch up. So we're talking about then finding out about our common origin, and one place we can find out about our common origin is by looking at the creation, and through the creation knowing the creator. So I mean, you could look out the window here, you look out over the fields and the cows, you know, out to Salisbury Plain, And there's a lot of green, so obviously there's no question about it, God is green. I mean, that is clearly that God is green. Or, you might look up into the heavens and you might see a blue sky and then God is blue. Surely God is blue. Anyway, what I'm talking about is we're in our search for some insight, profound insight into the nature of God. We'd be looking for universal principles. In other words, something which is fundamental to life and existence and held in common as a fundamental across the whole of the universe, across the whole of creation. And then that would say something profound about the Creator, because it is a fundamental property universally. So those are the sorts of insights we're seeking in looking at the universe in order to understand more profoundly about the nature of the Creator. So I'm going to particularly mention that our universe is a universe which you could say is composed of many, many different pair systems. In other words, in nature, in the universe, everything is composed not just of one thing, but is a combination of complementary parts. I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. But when those two complementary parts come together, they create a whole, and then that whole in turn finds another pair, and then unites with that and creates another higher level in a sense. So we see this type of pair. So there's a few images there. Stamen and pistil, and male and female in human existence in the animal world, and also in nature, the coming together of positive and negative in nature. So our world is a world of complementary pairs. And this is going to say something very important. I mean, what might immediately occur to you? Our world is a world of complementary pairs. Well, that means that nothing exists as an island. Nothing exists on its own in isolation from everything else. On the contrary, everything exists for the sake of something else. And not only for the sake of one something else, but actually it's part of a whole network of pairs and intercooperation which makes up the universe at large. And what would be for sure is, if those pairs didn't work well, then the universe wouldn't exist fundamentally. So I'm going to talk about two particular sets of pairs. One is like the images we just saw, and that's the images of male and female, or masculinity and femininity, which we see, of course, in human existence, because we're males and females, and in the animal world, males and females, but in the plant world, you might talk about stamen and pistil, masculine and feminine elements within plant life. And even in the inanimate world, then we see these, different charges, electron, proton, etc., anion, cation in structures, whereby there's these two different aspects, but actually never exist apart from one another. They actually always exist in connection with one another. We can identify there's different elements, but we never find them on their own. They're always with one another, and they have such a important interaction with one another that actually, through coming together, they create a greater whole. So this is very, very important element, the relationship, if you like, between masculinity and femininity. So it's a crucial pair system. And if you take this, I'm not going to talk about this in full depth today. There's a different presentation which would emphasize it more. But what this means, for example, in terms of gender issues that we face today, clearly men need women and women need men, and men and women together make something bigger, together, well harmonized with one another, that they absolutely couldn't make alone, to the degree that if they tried to be alone, there wouldn't be any more of anything in that sense. So, they're critically, absolutely, vitally important that they behave as a pair. And if you think of it as well, interestingly, from the point of view of the Creator, as Father Moon would have expressed it, the male's purpose for existence is clearly for the sake of the female. And the female's purpose of existence is clearly for the sake of the male. And then together, of course, they have a greater purpose, like, for example, their children and their family and so on. And then when you think of a family doesn't just exist for itself, it's part of a wider society. So one family living for other families, and then families living together, making a community, then communities living together, making a nation, and so on, and so on, and so on. So all down the line, in a sense, ideally, if things worked in human society as they work in the natural world, we would all be perceiving ourselves and looking for our partner and seeking a relationship with our partner such that we are existing for each other's sake and creating another unit, which in turn then seeks another partner, and through living for the sake of that partner creates a larger unit and a larger unit and a larger unit. So everything is in that sense part of a pair system. This is the male and female. Why I was mentioning about gender, of course, is that obviously means that you can't ascribe greater value to men than women, or to women than men, because if we didn't have each other, we wouldn't be anything. So that sort of perspective is actually very insightful. And of course, historically, religion has often been, what we would use this term today wouldn't be very patriarchal. Big emphasis on masculine authority. But if you think of it from this point of view, of course, actually, that doesn't make sense in the long run. Or if you look at scripture, and I've often heard this from my Muslim brothers and sisters, you talk about, there are scriptural quotations about the importance of women, and Muhammad being asked what's the most precious and valuable thing, and he says your mother and your mother and your mother and your mother. Or you at the feet, to bow at the feet of your mother. But not everything, of course, that's actually undertaken in terms of religious practice lives up to the purest and most beautiful ideals. But there's this incredible pair system that you could characterize as male and female. Male and female is not something we find just in one world, just in the human world, or just in the animal world, or just in the plant world, but across all life and all existence, including inanimate things as well. Not just male and female in that sense, but positive and negative as well. Okay, so another pair system, and this is a very interesting one as well. This is the relationship between the outward form, as it were, and the inner sort of essence of everything. So mind and body are a pair, and if you really get to know somebody very, very deeply, you will never see their mind. Even if you make an incision and look inside, you will not see their mind. How do you find out about their mind? Because surely there is some essence, some soul, some spirituality. How do you find out about that? Because it's not tangible. You can't touch it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, etc. It's because it actually expresses itself through the body. So what is the body? The body is in a sense a reflection of the mind, or the second mind, or the outward form of the mind, if you like. And so one is expressing itself through the other. But what if you have a mind and you don't have a body? Well, actually that's difficult because you need your partner. Because if you have a motivation, a desire, a yearning, something you want to express, then you need some way to express it. And your body is that means of expression. So mind and body are a pair system. They need each other. Of course, you might say that the quality of the mind you might regard as more important than the quality of the body. Actually, the mind needs a body and the body needs a mind. They need each other. And when you think about it on the level of animal existence, you have instinct, an intelligence, a sense of direction, a sort of motivation, which is directly in the body of the animal, and sometimes in the most extraordinary ways. I was just I picked up a book the other day because I hadn't run out of books to read. I picked up a book not knowing how profound it was. It's a very interesting book, and it was talking about the value of love and about searching for your love partner. It was a very interesting story about a Jewish family, and in this particular family, the grandfather was a soldier in the First World War for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, fighting the Russians, and he got, captured and taken to Siberia, and he walked about 3,000 miles from a prisoner of war camp in Siberia back to his hometown in search of his boyhood one love. And his life, he survived that, and he made it there, and ultimately, extraordinarily, they got together and had children. And the story is of his grandson who falls in love with a girl. They travel together to South America, and then she dies tragically. And then all his life is influenced by this, and he's searching for this lost person in a sense. And lo and behold, he discovers about his family history and his granddad, who was that man who walked from Siberia all the way back to sort of Poland, that area. And it's sort of the whole commonality of love and love experience that they had together. Anyhow, this is another very interesting pair system. But actually everything in the whole universe is a pair system. Everything in the whole universe has some sort of invisible, internal, intangible nature which is expressing itself through an external form or a material expression. So if we think about the inanimate world, the world of atoms and particles and so on and so on and so on, there is a pattern there, and science is always observing and finding a pattern. That pattern has some sort of invisible laws or invisible nature which is expressing itself through that pattern. So everything in the universe has like this. And how do these exist? They always exist together, and they need each other. That is a very important relationship. I'm going to use this a lot to talk about peace building, in the sense that the quality of a human being, if we're going to make a more peaceful world, basically we need better human beings. What does this mean? It means we need better minds. So the mind needs to be elevated, but also that mind then needs to be in charge of the body, so that we have integrity. You may have lots of high ideals, but if actually in your daily life you never practice them, you just worship them or read about them or whatever, but you can't do them, then actually this is not very helpful. So how do you put mind and body together in that sense? So another very fundamental pair system. So in other words, when you look at the universe and you look for universal characteristics that are fundamental and present in everything, in order to get an insight into the nature of the Creator, then surely the Creator is a harmonized being. Because all through the creation we see the harmony between two, coming together and making one. And surely the Creator has, aspects that are expressed in the whole creation must have similar aspects. So the Creator is the source of all the energy, if you like, out of which ultimately everything comes into being. But that is not just energy, not just a force, not just something, that expresses itself in the creation as a material force, but actually it's an intelligence, it's a motivation, it's a heart, it's a source of purpose, an internal quality as well. Or you might even say if the whole of the creation is made of masculine and feminine, then actually even within the source of the origin there must be a nature which is relatable to the masculine and nature which is relatable to the feminine. So in many different religious convictions, whilst patriarchy is being the way of it many, many times, there is a recognition of a feminine aspect as well when you look at the Creator and the origin. So we'll come back to that sort of thought in a few moments, but I just want to talk as well about the principle of interaction. So in any pair system, in order for that pair to operate, there must be a relationship between the two aspects. So you could be talking about mind and body, you You could be talking about male and female. You could be talking about so many different types of pairs. But in order for them to be a pair, they must have a relationship with one another. And in that relationship, there must be a giving and responding. So there must be a side that initiates, if you like, the relationship. And then having given of itself, then something should be received and responded to in order to cement the relationship. So that's it's another principle of the pair system, if you like. You have a subject partner, a giving side, and you have an object partner that receives and responds. And then as they interact with one another, ultimately they come together and unite and they make a oneness, and that oneness then in turn may embark on another relationship with another level, where there'll be a giving side and a responding side and a unity that's established through that. So we talked before about how, in a sense, the body is the expression of the mind. So, isn't it extraordinary? Some people, for example, will say that by reading the hand, not just the lines, but the relationship between the palm and the length of the fingers and the different fingers against one another, you can tell about the character of a person even if you don't know them. Or you can feel the topography of their skull, the different lumps and bumps, and you can tell about them. Or you can look at their ear.
Wow, I didn't know that one.
And you can know, through their ear how big this is and how you can know about their character. Because, why is that? For example, if I want to change my character, what will I do then? I go to the surgeon and get this one a bit shorter and a couple more lines on here, or lengthen that line, and then my character will change. No, because the more subjective side is actually something internal, invisible, which is expressing itself through your physical.
That's right.
But here we go. There's a person, standing here like this. My impression is this guy's got to the top of the mountain, right? And he's feeling a sense of exhilaration. And then, without even thinking about it, it's yes. I made it there. And the body then is expressing something that's in the mind. Otherwise, how would we know? Of course, maybe we get some spiritual feeling from the other person, but usually, how do we understand what they say, what they do, what they demonstrate, how they express themselves physically, is revealing what's in their heart and in their mind. So in that sense, the body resembles the mind. But also, think about it as well, in this relationship, the teacher and pupil relationship. Of course, in one sense, the teacher's clearly in the subjective position, because the teacher's imparting knowledge or learning or understanding or expertise or professionalism or some sort of developed quality to the pupil. But then if you have someone who's teaching, but you don't have anybody who's listening or interested or curious or wants to know, the teacher becomes useless. Because although you might say the teacher's so valuable, the teacher doesn't have a student or a pupil, or if the religious founder doesn't have a disciple, then there's no way to exchange this value. There's no way to give this value. So teachers in the subjective position, pupils in the objective position, but then over time, of course, what will naturally happen is hopefully the teacher and the pupil, but hopefully over time the pupil will come up and up and up and up and up and up, and ultimately stand at the same. Or of course, age surpass, or as we get older. Then I remember teaching my kids football and cricket. Well, I think now I would struggle to compete. I used to be a great table tennis player, but now if I face my boys at table tennis, there's no way I'm going to make it anymore. So over time, then of course we impart something, we create a unity with one another, but also through that there's an inheritance and so on and so on and so on. So there's a principle of interaction. To have a pair system, one side must give what's needed by the other side responds, and then there's a flowing of energy between the two, back and forth, and then that creates another unity, another existence comes out of it. And one interesting point as well to understand is that in this interaction, For example, think about the physical body. There's many different systems. There's the respiratory system, digestive system, the pulmonary system, the heart, the veins, the arteries, all these different systems, central nervous system, and so on and so on and so on. All these different systems are there, but how does it work? It works because actually they all exist to maintain the health and the well-being of the body as a whole. In other words, they're contributing to you might say, a higher purpose. Or if you think about teachers and pupils or an education system, hopefully the teacher isn't just there to make money through a salary, or even maybe through corruption. You pay me money and you're going to pass your exams miraculously. Some sort of corrupt system which is completely selfishly motivated. But the teacher's intention should be actually to, yes, of course, raise up the pupil, but ultimately to contribute through that to the benefit and well-being of the wider society. Passing on everything you have to lift someone else up to be better than you, but ultimately to lift up and enhance the value of society at large. So best thing is, right thing is, original thing is, creator's perception is, this one was created for this one. When they interact with one another, they should interact with one another according to the intention of the origin of the creator. So, take something like,
a pen.
it's in my other pocket, but take something like this, a key, right? So a key has a partner. What's the partner to the key?
Keyboard.
The lock, right. Key and the lock. So of course, they don't have a common origin. That's the way it works. Never have a common origin. So you've got one factory that makes keys, another factory that makes locks, and they don't communicate with one another.
It doesn't work.
Does that sound like it's going to be a good way of doing it? And what happens is you just, one day you get a big truck and you take all the keys from the key factory to the lock factory and you spew them all out on the ground and you keep trying each key to see if it fits any of the locks. Does that sound like a good plan? No, so when you see the key fits the lock, it's evidence, isn't it, of a common origin and a common purpose. And if you have a load of keys, but you don't know what they fit. In my home, when I was a little boy, there used to be all these things from my grandparents and their parents. And one thing we had was a little basket of keys. And of course, all these keys must have fitted something at some point.
You couldn't find them.
But when we took them out, me and my brother took them out and tried them in all the locks in the house, it didn't fit anything anymore. So they were fascinating in their own right, as old keys, but actually they didn't fit anymore.
They're no use.
So, the key fits the lock. Why does the key fit the lock? Because of the design. But you could use a key for something else. Maybe you could use it to try and, prise something open, or to, do something that would actually damage the key and mean it would never fulfill its function.
No.
So, in the pair system, there is an original purpose that means that this one fits that one. When this one fits that one, it's not just accidental, it's intentional.
Planned.
And if you want to find out how to fit each other best, where do you look to? You look to actually the origin and the purpose. It's an interesting thought, and probably that thought is present in all the great religious traditions. In other words, if only we can find out what God wanted, what God's intention was, we would find a much better way of getting on with one another, because we would be enlightened by the original purpose, and then we would be able to harmonize and we'd be able to maximize the quality of the interaction. So understanding higher purpose is very important in the pair system, and centering the pair system on the higher purpose. And then when that happens, then in a sense you can maximize the positive outcomes that are coming from that relationship. So let's push through the one again. Here we go. So think about it like this, and this is a diagrammatic insight that our founder used a lot, and is used a lot in these principles. It's saying that everything that exists doesn't exist isolated. Everything that exists to interact with its partner. And in this interaction, everything this one has is not actually for this one, it's actually to be given to this one. in order to realize its potential, fulfill its purpose. It must be given. You know, if you've got the key and it never goes in a lock, there's no point in the key. So it must be given to the object, and of course the object should receive what's given and respond, and then actually through this, the dynamic and the energy created by this interaction, they will actually become one. They will make a union. So they will interact with each other, become one, and then this will make a union. Their unity will become another being, which is the amalgam, the unity of subject and object. And that unity of subject and object, what does it reflect? What's it an expression of? It's an expression of the purpose of the Creator. So, you know, if you like, when God envisaged men and woman, He envisaged how they would actually live for the sake of each other, how they would love each other, how they would make something beautiful. And when they make that something beautiful through the right type of interaction, then that resembles the unity that is God. It reproduces it, it makes it again, it expands it, it develops it, it expresses it in the universe. But of course, if they interact with one another, not centering on the higher purpose, or you know, God's original purpose, they have no sense for higher purpose, but they're just, you know, exploiting each other, you know, using each other, then this will not fulfill the original purpose, because actually their interaction isn't centered on the higher purpose. And when you're talking about higher purpose, what are you ultimately talking about? Our founder expressed you're actually talking about, in the end, higher motivation. Because, you know, what's making something good as opposed to something bad or damaging? Ultimately, it's motivation. It's the heart and the inner purpose that you have in what you do. So that's, you know, in other words, our founder always talks about the heart of God, or the heart of love that springs from God, or the ultimate source of love. So, you know, in the interaction, for example, between men and women, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, that the purpose is actually to make something that is beautiful to the Creator. So, you know, when you see your beautiful partner, who you can live your life for and who will receive it and respond to you, what is this an expression of? This is not just your partner, this your partner is the gift of God. The potential for this beauty that becomes your relationship is not your doing, it's not your making. Or put it another way around, think about it this one, instead of husband and wife, male and female, think about this one as parents and children, for example. So where does the concept come, where did it emerge from? The idea that parents need children, children need parents, and all the beauty that happens in that is actually it's not my doing, not your doing, it's actually the doing of the Creator in that sense. And so, you know, there's a gratitude and an appreciation of the universe, of this incredibly beautiful, wonderful existence of which you're a part. And there's a sense of having been loved and having a desire to love back towards the universe, towards God, towards the higher purpose, towards that original ultimate motivation. And that becomes the motivation for engaging in the relationship and in valuing one another. And then through that relationship and making this place where you meet not just each other, not just your pair or your partner, but also you meet God's purpose of love. When you meet in that place, that creates an outcome, a result, you know, a union, an expression of the intention of the Creator substantiated, you know, in the world of creation. So this is like a way of development. So it's a way sort of to measure our lives and all our relationships and all our interactions, and a way to uplift them. I mean, if we can connect all those relationships that fill our lives and try and connect them to a higher purpose, try and make sure they're pleasing to God, try and make sure they're according to the law of love, or the law of the universe, then the outcome becomes much better. And then this develops or expands God's original intention of creation, or the beautiful harmony, or it fulfills, it realizes the blessing of the pair system in terms of actually creating a world of good results, of joy, peace, of happiness. So springing out of higher motivation, love of God, and then consequent love of others. Why do you love the other? Why do you give yourself for the sake of the other? Because actually you feel profoundly grateful to God, and you want to behave in a way that's pleasing to God, and then you guide yourself in the direction to live for the sake of another. When that sort of heart and motivation lies behind the interaction, then the interaction realizes the peaceful world which is present within the nature of the Creator, which what the Creator's intention was to multiply that, in the world in which we live. So higher purpose, good give and take action, living for each other, good result. So in a sense, it's as simple as that. If we could only do it, if we could only understand that I'm not the most important, I'm not trying to get everybody else to live for my sake so I can be happy, but rather I'm trying to discover what is my God-given purpose and how can I pursue that in giving of myself for the sake of God and the other, then actually we can bring much better outcome. So we've tended to maybe restrict that within our own, culture or faith or whatever, but actually I think all of us here have this sense that diversity is something wonderful. The creation is diverse. Why the diversity? It means we have a chance to live for each other, across a broader spectrum. And that means we can create something more beautiful, more wonderful. So whilst in the past, in human history, maybe people of a different culture or ethnicity or religion bound together within that grouping, but when they looked outside of it, they just saw their enemies, or someone different or less than themselves. Now we understand actually what a beautiful thing it is to live in a culture where we're all mixed up with one another, because there's so much to learn from each other. So maybe we're enjoying that now in our restaurants and in our culinary aspect to life. The fact that someone's trying to find out about Guatemalan food, or all different culinary culture, because it means life's much more exciting and interesting. But actually, that goes much beyond cooking or food or whatever.
Can we stop?
We will do in just a moment. So, ultimately then, the pair system is not confined just to one relationship, it's present in all relationships. And, there are thousands upon thousands of different pair relationships. But in each case, of course, one should be living for the sake of the other, and then the other should be responding. And then through this good relationship. So, of course, there's one struggle of democracy, which is a great idea in a sense, but does the government really exist as a servant of the people? Or are people taking positions within that in order to express their desire to be powerful, or to enrich themselves, or to improve the position of their class or their ethnicity or whatever it is over and above all other ones, or whatever? Parents and children, well, as a social worker, of course, you understand how precious it is, parents and children, but also you do see circumstances where, because of maybe the inadequacy of their own parenting, you see parents abusing or unable to meet the needs of their children, or trying to meet their own needs through the way they relate to their children rather than meeting their children's needs. And then of course it doesn't work. But it ought to work like this. And fundamentally, and I'll stop after just explaining about this. Here we go. Yeah. The key to success is the subject lifts to the object lifts to the subject. So under living for God and the higher purpose, we live for one another. So I just end with some scriptural quotations from the New Testament. Whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. In other words, if you give of yourself without thought for yourself, everything will grow and develop. But if you seek to benefit yourself from all your relationships, everything will diminish.
That's right.
very hard to practice, very maybe not so difficult for us to understand.
It's true.
In Islam, do not expect in giving any increase for yourself. So if you give, you shouldn't be thinking, what am I going to get? You should be giving without thinking to get it. Or in the Bhagavad Gita, of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed by those who desire no reward is the nature of goodness. Or from Sikhism, what is that love which is based on greed? When there is greed, the love is false.
Yes.
So, the interaction that we're making with one another should be rooted in higher purpose, which is ultimately rooted in highest love, in a sense. And then our interactions with one another should be ones in which we live for the sake of God and a higher purpose, or if you want to put in a religious context, to be pleasing to God through relating to the other in the way that God envisaged it, intended it, meant it to be, rather than putting keys into the wrong locks and breaking them, or using them to take a stone out of something and damaging and destroying them, and destroying all that potential, all that possibility to do good. We should be doing things according to the intention of God.